5 things I wouldn't do as a midwife of 8 years plus 3 years of training. Number 1, I would never just wing it. That is a bad idea for labour and birth. You don't know what you don't know. So with that concept in mind, how can you possibly make decisions in labour and birth when you're probably in pain, feeling quite vulnerable, possibly overwhelmed and intimidated by the hospital environment or the situation that you find yourself in, and then having to make decisions about things that you've never even heard of? Not a good idea. Number 2, I would make sure I had the right birth partner. That's not necessarily your partner, husband, boyfriend, girlfriend. You need to make sure that your partner has done the antenatal education alongside you so they know what's going on. That might not necessarily be your partner, and that's okay, but make sure you have the right team around you. Number 3, you might think I'm being precious, but I wouldn't wear a hospital gown. I know they're cleaned and starched, and I know most people don't care once they're in labour, but I wouldn't wear one. I would either wear my own clothes or I'd buy one and wear it fresh and clean. Lots of people wear hospital gowns in lots of different situations. It just wouldn't be for me. Number 4, I wouldn't just accept a plan. I would discuss it. I'd go through the benefits, the risks, the alternatives, what other options are available to me. But just because there was a doctor or midwife stood in front of me telling me what should or should not happen, I wouldn't just accept it. I would have a discussion first. This is your body, it's your baby, it's their 12-hour shift. Whilst they are well-meaning, experienced and well-intentioned, it's still your choice. And you also need to understand this stuff. How can you possibly be consenting and making a decision that is both informed consent and one you feel comfortable with if you don't fully understand it? I wouldn't have a C-section without drinking water all the way up to a couple hours before my C-section. The difference I see in women going into a C-section hydrated compared to dehydrated is huge. And I know that the recovery is so much better if you go in hydrated.
So there's a trend going around about things that you wouldn't do based upon your profession. So I'm going to give you my top 5 as a neurosurgeon. Number 1 would be obvious, but don't get excessively drunk. Probably one of the most common things I see with brain injuries and spine injuries is that people who have been excessively drinking and they get in a car accident or they fall down the stairs or they even end up drowning. Number 2 would be not wearing your helmet. I mean, always wear your helmet. I see so many injuries of people who fall and hit their head, and wearing your helmet can be the difference between living and dying. Number 3, don't ignore what your body's telling you. I mean, I have so many people who have headaches for 3 to 6 months, and then they finally end up getting an MRI of the brain and they find out they have a brain tumor. Or, people who have chronic pain over 6 months to a year in their back or spine, and they end up getting an imaging study that shows they have cancer. So don't ignore what your body's telling you. Number 4, never dive into a body of water that you don't know the depth. You'd be amazed the number of people who just dive into water and they end up getting a brain or spine injury. So never dive into water that you don't know how deep it is. And number 5, last but not least, I would never have surgery done if I didn't understand what the surgery was going to be. So those are my thoughts as a neurosurgeon. Let me know what you think. If you have any comments, I'd love to read them.
5 things I would never do after being a plastic surgeon for 18 years. I would never put my face into the face of a dog I didn't know really, really well. I love dogs, I rescue them, I've got 2 right now, and I have seen so many people who've had chunks of their face ripped off by a dog that they didn't know well. Number 2 is I would never ride motorcycles. There's a reason why we call them donor cycles in the hospital. Number 3 is I would never assume a person is overweight because they are lazy or they eat too much. There's so much that goes into a person's weight, including hormones, their microbiome, and their basal metabolic rate, that to assume that somebody just eats too much or is lazy, making them overweight, is an oversimplification and not fair. Number 4 is I would never smoke or vape. I can spot a smoker the moment they walk in my office because their skin typically looks older and drier than it should. Number 5, I would never pick the plastic surgeon with the biggest ad. In general, the larger the ad, the larger the billboard, the worse the cosmetic surgeon. Choose them based off their reputation.
Hello, I'm Jamie and I'm a vet, and here's my 5 things I wouldn't do. So, number one, I would not let Otis lick my face. Dogs have a lot of bacteria in their mouths, and they can even give us things like roundworm and tapeworm, so definitely no licking of the face. Next, I wouldn't feed him food from the table. So although they may like it and they may even love it, it can encourage begging behaviour, which can be very frustrating for people at home. And pet obesity is one of the biggest things that we struggle with in our industry, so definitely no table scraps with this one. Next, I personally wouldn't feed a raw food diet. It's not to say that there aren't dogs out there who are doing really well on a raw food diet, but they do have an increased risk of causing things like salmonella and E. coli in our dogs. Furthermore, if it's not a complete diet, you're just making it up as you go along, you may be giving your dog a nutritional deficiency, which is not ideal. Next, I would make sure I didn't forget to give him his vaccines and making sure I keep on top of his flea and his worming. So common to see these problems in the vets. I see fleas and worms pretty much on a daily basis, so making sure he's covered is really important. Final thing, I personally wouldn't allow Otis to play with tennis balls, sticks or rocks. I see a lot of injuries from all of these things, a lot of tooth erosion from tennis balls. It's just not worth the damage, it's not worth the fun. Get other toys, get safer toys, there are many of them out there.
So yesterday I made a video about why I will never take a cruise as a nurse, and I thought I would share some other things that I also do or will not do because I'm a nurse. And this is based on things that I have seen go wrong as a nurse in my just personal experience. Okay, first, if I'm the first one up to go when the light turns green, I still pause an extra second, even if the light turns green, and I look all directions. Same thing at a train stop, even if the thing isn't down, I still look and slow down when I go across train tracks. I am the only one allowed to take my kids swimming. I don't trust anybody else, no family members, nobody. I will never buy a DockATot or like a Snuggle Me Lounger. I can explain more if you'd like. I am very anti those scooters that you rent because when I worked a travel assignment on ortho, so many people got hurt on them. Even if they weren't drinking or they were being safe, cars hit them all the time. And then lastly, my children are taught all their anatomically correct body parts and never forced to give hugs or have body contact with anyone, even family members, if they don't want to.
5 things that I wouldn't do as a funeral director. Number 1, ride a motorcycle, otherwise known as donor cycles. Number 2, be embalmed. Ask just about any embalmer if they want to be embalmed. Number 3, be a long bone donor or full thickness tissue donor. Number 4, trust a funeral home to care for my body without fully vetting them first. Number 5, go a day without telling those I love that I love them.
5 things I would never do as a board-certified child and adolescent psychiatrist. Number 1, let my kids have their own smartphone. Not today, not in my house. Number 2, put a television in my child's room. Number 3, talk negatively about my spouse in front of my kids. That's also going to be a no-no. Number 4, do everything for my child so that they don't develop habits like discipline and chores and doing those kind of things and being a part of the family in that way. And then number 5, I would never, ever, ever, ever let them do a sleepover. So what do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do we need a part 2?
Here's 5 things I would never do as a mom as an eating disorder dietitian. And just as a disclaimer, I am not currently a mom. I hope to be one day, but I am not today. These are just things that I know really mess with kids' relationships with food. Number 1, I will not under any circumstances put my child on a diet or tell them that they need to lose weight. Number 2, I will not go on any diets myself or pursue intentional weight loss because this indicates to a child that this is the proper way to interact with food in a restrictive and obsessive way. Number 3, I will not call foods good or bad, healthy or unhealthy. I will refer to them as play foods or fun foods or nutrient-dense and nutritious foods. Using neutral language to describe food removes the morality and lets kids know that it's okay for all foods to fit into their diets. Number 4, I will never body shame my child, myself, or other people. And if my child comes to me one day and says, I feel fat, I will not respond with, you're not fat, you're beautiful. Instead, I'll respond with curiosity and wondering why they might think that, why they might feel that, and be supportive of their feelings without insinuating that being fat is a bad thing, because it's not. And number 5, I will never force my child to finish all the food on their plate or restrict food when they are telling me that they're hungry. I will encourage and reinforce to my child that they know their body best and they can trust themselves around their hunger and fullness cues. Let me know any questions you have in the comments.
Hopping on this trend and doing 5 things I wouldn't do as a food scientist. 1. I wouldn't go out of my way to buy organic produce. Organic produce is no better for you nutritionally. It's not any more sustainable, and they still use pesticides. So unless the organic produce is cheaper than the conventional produce, I'm just gonna buy whatever's cheaper. No need to buy organic. 2. I would not drink unpasteurized milk, also called raw milk. I'm not really sure why people drink raw milk, but pasteurization is actually a really important process that helps reduce the bacteria in your milk. Between pasteurized milk and unpasteurized milk, there's really no significant difference in terms of nutrition. So I don't really know why people do this. Personally, I would not take the risk and drink raw milk. There's no point. 3. Throw out food just because it reached its sell-by date or its best-by date. The date that's on your food packaging, it's for food quality. It's not a representation of like the food safety of your product. A lot of the times your product can go beyond the best-by date or beyond the sell-by date. So don't just toss everything from your fridge just because it reached that date. 4. Would not be scared of a long ingredient list. A lot of those times, those ingredients have a functional purpose. I know a lot of people on TikTok like to tell you, oh, a simple ingredient list is the best. Not necessarily. 5. I would not buy anything that says detox or markets themselves as a detox food or drink or whatever. Your body does a good job of detoxing. You have a liver for a reason. You have a kidney for a reason. This food is not gonna magically detox you.